From a dangerous late-night car crash not too long ago to a laundry list of past crimes that would make you dizzy, here's the real reason Gervonta Davis is under house arrest. The story begins on the 5th of November, 2020, which was the boxer's birthday, to be specific. And I really don't have anything against people celebrating their birthdays, but Davis took things a little too far. When after leaving the Medusa restaurant and lounge, he hit the road at around 2 a.m. and ran a red light, crashing his car into another car with 4 people inside. And look, there's no erasing something like that. But the least you can do in a situation like that is not leave without even calling emergency responders, because the people you hit could be seriously hurt. But instead of calling for help, Gervonta made himself look even worse by leaving the scene of the accident. He just hopped into a friend's Camaro and dipped like he was getting away from a bank robbery. Also, if he'd stuck around, he would have seen that one of the passengers in the other car was a pregnant woman. Honestly, he was lucky that none of them suffered life-threatening injuries, because if they had, then according to the law in Baltimore, Davis could have been sentenced to up to 5 years in prison. But that's not to say that the crash victims walked away without a scratch. The driver of the car the fighter hit testified that her knee was seriously injured and she was struggling to recover, even after several rounds of physical therapy. In fact, it got so bad that it left her unable to go to work or even play with her kids, leaving her with no option but to challenge him to a match in civil court. But this was hardly the fighter's only trouble, because the state of Baltimore itself was also waiting for him in the blue corner, to hit him with 14 jabs for running a red light, a cross for leaving the scene of an accident involving bodily injury, a hook for failing to notify an owner of property damage, and an uppercut for driving on a suspended license. All misdemeanor charges. Lucky for him, though, he didn't injure anyone to the point of adding a felony to his list. But the charges alone were a lot to deal with, because each comes with the possibility of spending a year in jail, not to even mention the tons of fines. And that suspended license turned into a nightmare for him too, because it was a new addition to Davis's already long list of driving violations, which also includes a notorious drunken driving charge in 2018. And I know those charges can't be punished in this case, but they definitely weren't a good look when it came to the judge's impression of him. In fact, his history of legal trouble had such a strong influence on this case that the courts didn't want to go easy on Davis at all. I mean, the case did look really bad for him right from the start, but that didn't stop his team from trying to get a favorable plea deal with the state, one that would hit Davis with a suspended sentence of a year, along with 60 days of home confinement and work release. And Judge Melissa Finn, who was hearing, also asked the driver's opinion on this. And come on now, 60 days at home with the option to continue working. Yeah, there's no way Smith was going to accept that. So she told the judge how she looked Davis in the eyes and asked for his help when he was running away, just to show how cold he'd been after injuring her so seriously. And even her attorney, Gil Amaral, was shocked by this plea from Davis's team, because to him, the confinement sentence with work release was a slap on the wrist for this case. Clearly, Judge Finn was on their side too, because she rejected the plea, and this kept the negotiations going. And you know what? A lot of people were convinced that this was all part of a bigger plan, and this whole plea thing was meant to drag things on for longer so that Davis could continue his boxing career while the case was still being deliberated. And that worked for a couple of months before Davis was finally indicted in March of 2021. By the way, you're wrong if you think he got the maximum penalty for his charges. But still, the sentence he did end up with was no picnic either, because in the end, the court sentenced him to 90 days of home detention with no work release and 3 years probation. Oh, and there's more. He'll also have to perform 200 hours of community service, complete a program at the Adams Cowley Shock Trauma Center, participate in a Mothers Against Drunk Driving Victim Impact panel, and pay a fine of $100. Also, Baltimore Circuit Judge Althea Handy didn't make the sentencing part easy for him either. She really gave Davis a piece of her mind, saying that Davis was a coward who couldn't even apologize to the woman he injured. But the case didn't end here. A final detail had yet to be settled. Where was Davis going to serve out his house arrest? His main residence is a beautiful home in Florida, and Judge Handy wasn't comfortable with him basically taking a vacation there, so she decided that Davis would serve his sentence in Baltimore, which also ended up being kind of convenient for him, because Calvin Ford, Gervonta's trainer, who's like a father to the fighter, offered to let him serve his sentence at his home in Baltimore. And while the judge allowed this, Smith still wanted Davis to be incarcerated, which ended up happening after all. Davis was tossed into jail in June of 2023. I get the feeling this guy is as comfortable losing legal battles as he is losing boxing matches, because why else would he dare to escape his house arrest, only less than a month into it? Yep, Gervonta was picked up by authorities from a local Four Seasons when he was supposed to be confined in the house. It turns out that the boxer was in the middle of trying to secure a condo worth $3.75 million, with scenic views and a piano in the listing pictures. How on earth did Gervonta even think he'd get away with this? Well, his attorney Michael Tomko has been trying to take the blame for this stunt by saying that Ford was living in a one-bedroom apartment, which was barely enough to house Davis, and definitely couldn't accommodate his security team, so he came up with the idea to relocate Davis to the Four Seasons until the purchase of the condo was a done deal. And just like that, Davis ended up in front of Judge Handy again, and she'd had it with his shenanigans. Despite his attorney's pleas to not punish him, the judge sent him right to jail to finish the rest of his 90-day sentence. So now that he's in custody, I think it's safe to say that the case is finally closed. But the speculations about the future of his career have only just begun. So what could this mean for Davis's career? Let's be honest, a 90-day break from boxing won't do much to slow him down. The real problem for him will be how he's seen by his fans when he returns. Look, Gervonta is far from the first boxer to end up in jail, and he's been compared to stars like Floyd Mayweather and Mike Tyson, though Davis's crimes don't hold a candle to those guys. So between this situation and all the other scandals he's had, there's a chance that Gervonta may end up being defined by his controversies, and there sure are a lot of them. Come to think of it, this case was nothing compared to some of the people Davis has gotten into legal trouble with before, and the list of those people is pretty darn long. In 2017, Davis was arrested in Baltimore for first-degree aggravated assault after he punched a childhood friend in the side of the head with a gloved fist. That charge was downgraded to a misdemeanor second-degree assault, and he wasn't convicted on that either, because the friend ended up dropping the charges. But then just next year, in 2018, he was arrested again. This time for getting into a fistfight with another man and running away from the cops. And then, earlier in 2020, Gervonta faced the biggest scandal of his career when he was caught on video manhandling his girlfriend during a basketball game in Miami. And for this, he was arrested on charges of simple battery and domestic violence, but the girlfriend's never pressed charges herself. And that wasn't the only time he was accused of domestic violence, because while this very case was going through the court, Davis was tossed in a Florida jail after a woman called 911 from his house, begging for help because she was afraid the boxer was gonna kill her, though this woman didn't press charges either. Do you see a pattern? It seems like every time Gervonta is close to the legal fire, he gets away last minute because the charges are dropped against him. But even the slipperiest of crooks get caught eventually. So, from a pattern of reckless behavior to an almost deadly car accident in 2020, that was the real reason Gervonta Davis is under house arrest.